It was as difficult for us as I think it is for most other people who are buying your first short-term rental. I mean, we were facing the same fears that everybody else was. I guess I just had that nagging voice in the back of my head that was like, just do it, just go. You can figure it out, right? Like no matter what happens, no matter what problems come up, there is a way out. You can always figure out a way out.
Welcome to STR Unlocked, a podcast for driven vacation rental investors looking to gain the freedom that comes with an abundance of time and money.
I'm April.
And I'm Nathan.
Our life is busy with 3 small children, full-time jobs, and not nearly enough coffee. And we're unlocking success with short-term rental investing every single day. Join us in our journey as we learn and grow together.
If we can do it, so can you.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome to episode number 2 of the Short-Term Rental Unlocked podcast, the STR Unlocked podcast. The kids are now in bed, and I am here with my beautiful wife, April. How's it going?
It's going good. How are you, Nathan?
Good. Yeah, doing good. I'm excited to have the second episode here and to talk with you guys about our experience in buying our first short-term rental. So we talked in the first episode essentially about kind of the decisions that we went through to get to the first rental, the decision to purchase. And this episode, we're actually going to talk about from the time we decided to go ahead and do it to the actual purchase. We're going to kind of outline how we did it, who we worked with, kind of what our experiences were. And so I think where I want to start is asking you. So, I feel like we function best when we have kind of a clearly defined goal and we know that there's like a time frame. Like we set a time frame for the goal. And so we say, hey, we want to get this accomplished by this time. We tend to work best that way. So do you remember we actually did that with the rental, like finding our first short-term rental?
Yeah. So we talk about this all the time. If we set a goal, we're probably going to take the exact amount of time that we have in order to achieve that goal. That's exactly what happened here. Yeah. So we had, at the time I was pregnant with our third son. He was born on October 4th. We did decide that while I was on maternity leave and I had all this extra time, that we were going to use that time to be able to set up our first short-term rental and get kind of all of our systems in place before I went back to work from maternity leave. So our son was born on October 4th. We got our first rental under contract. I think that we signed our contract and it was accepted on October 28th. Yeah. So less than a month after our son was born. We were very sleep deprived and excited, but really didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And then our first guest.
That is not the reason we put in an offer, by the way. We were fully conscious.
Might have pushed us over the edge just a little bit.
Fine, just do it. Just get it done.
Just make the baby stop crying.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got our first contract, got it under contract October 28th. It was a new construction cabin, so it wasn't quite finished. When we signed on it, it still had a couple of months to go. And so we actually signed on that contract. It was December 21st. It was just in time for that Christmas rush. We were really concerned that we weren't going to be able to get it up and going before then.
Yeah.
To be able to get that revenue. Do you remember that?
I totally forgot how stressful that was.
Oh yeah. It was very stressful.
I remember. I mean, we were constantly like checking emails, trying to see if there was an update that the lending process, that the closing process, how close we were to getting it all done. And then the builders, like there was the element that like we weren't sure that the builders were going to be done, that we'd actually be able to get into this rental, which we'll talk about in a minute. It was a new construction cabin. Yeah.
So we actually finally got the certificate of occupancy. We were able to get that loan closed out. We were able to sign and actually get it, in our hands so that we could actually get it going and up on Airbnb and Vrbo. We got that up and running on the 21st of December. Our very first guest checked in on December 27th. And that coincidentally was also my first day back at work. So exactly the amount of time that we had, we got it done. Our guest got in, had a great experience, and we've been running ever since.
I got to say, one of the weirdest experiences of my life ever was signing paperwork for
Do you remember what we signed it
$1 million plus business in Panera Bread? and I remember because it was like very weird that, sitting in Panera and, we're sitting there like tossing papers back and forth, and our newborn, at that point, how many weeks old was he?
Oh, he was just like, 3 weeks?
Yeah.
4 weeks old.
Our third son, like he was in his,
he was in the
car
carrier
seat.
on the floor.
Yeah. In his car seat on the floor. And it was nuts. It felt crazy. So yeah, like how did that feel? Like, I know it was a very stressful time. Yeah. How did it feel when we were actually at Panera Bread signing.
I mean, honestly, surreal. It still feels weird that we actually own a cabin and we're running it, even though I'm running it basically every day. I look at it after the kids go to bed, making sure that everything's lined up and ready to go. It's a little surreal. So glad that we did it. Lots of things that we're learning. And honestly, we did a lot of analysis, right? Nathan's a huge book person and podcast person, and he's all the time kind of gathering all the knowledge that he feels that he needs and that we need in order to be successful at this. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But analysis paralysis is real, right? So you had been talking about short-term rentals, really rentals in general, for a year and a half before we actually did anything. Yeah. And I could tell that you were starting to get a little frustrated that we didn't actually move on anything yet. So, being able to pull that trigger and actually jump in and do that was pretty exciting.
For sure. Yeah. And so what was interesting was, so we made the decision that we were going to purchase, and I was going to tell everybody kind of the process that we kind of went through. So it was funny. We put in offers on 2 places before we found our place. And for any investor who was putting in offers on properties, 6 months ago or a year ago, a year, 2 years ago, I mean, it's like very, like, you'll remember this vividly, putting in an offer, almost just knowing that it's not going to get accepted. Like,
yeah.
And I remember in the beginning, we were definitely very timid in our process because we were still learning. I mean, we had bought property before. I mean, we currently live in like our second home. So we've been through the buying process. We understand the buying process at a fundamental level, but this was like our first high dollar investment property purchase, right? Like this was kind of a stretch for us, for sure, just in our comfort level. And so, I remember it was really funny. So we found a organization, or not organization, but we found the Short-Term Shop. And if anybody doesn't know who Short-Term Shop is, basically a brokerage, a real estate brokerage, who specializes in kind of helping buyers, particularly investors, particularly I would imagine mostly small investors like we are, find and purchase their short-term rentals. They were in a few markets. A few coastal markets and then a few mountain markets. Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge seem to be kind of the mecca that they kind of started in and kind of grew out of, that and Gulf Shores. But anyway, and then we picked up Avery Carl. So Avery Carl is one of the brokers. Her and her husband, Avery and Luke, manage the brokerage. They're the brokers. And so anyway, so it was we decided to reach out to them mostly, honestly, because they were the only ones at the time. Now, I think there's a few others are starting to catch on, but they were the only ones at the time that was basically not only helping small-time investors buy short-term rentals and find their first properties, but they were actually helping to educate the short-term owners, many of whom were kind of self-managing, get their properties up and going, like how to get it listed on the platforms, what you need to know as far as, assembling your team that you're going to have. Things to kind of think about in the guest experience. Like they were kind of helping the owners and the investors, get up and going. And that education was like so important to us. Like we didn't, at that point we were still super new. We were reading, we were learning, and things were going well, but we really liked the idea of having that kind of support. That was like super important for us, super important to us. So yeah, we went ahead and we reached out. We got into their onboarding process, and we got matched up with a realtor who was in the Smoky Mountains. So that realtor, it was funny because the first conversation we were having, I mean, I'll give it to him as Luke. Lance
Lukey.
Sorry, Lance Lukey. That's why I was thinking Luke. But I'll give it to him. I remember the first conversations that we were having. He was like calling us like at 9:30 at night. Like our first offer we put in at 9:45 at night, right? Like he was on it. And so anyway, we put in 2 offers on 2 different properties. Both got rejected. And he came to us with a third property. He said, hey, there's actually a new construction community that's going in the Smokies. Would you guys be maybe interested in one of these properties? Now, at the time, it was definitely a higher purchase price than what we were kind of comfortable with. But we actually, we walked through and thought about the numbers and what our return, we were hoping that the return would be. And we kind of just started getting a little bit more comfortable with the idea of, thinking of this not just as a piece of real estate, but actually as a business and what that business was going to do for us, and getting really comfortable with the idea of the cash on cash return that this thing was going to generate. And so, it was really funny. At the end of the day, it was like the same moment that we were talking about putting in an offer on this cabin. There was another cabin, and then we basically said, hey, if they take it, because it was like a bigger cabin, and it'd be on the market for like 2 weeks, which is like an eternity. Like a year ago in the real estate market, it's an eternity. And I'll never forget, we basically told them, hey, if they'll take this, we'll purchase this cabin. But if not, let's go ahead and put in the offer on the 5-bedroom cabin, the new construction. And, for us, what was really interesting about that decision, because we had made a lot of decisions quickly, but we felt in a lot of ways it was a less risky proposition. It was a new construction cabin. So like we were able to have what we thought was going to be, and what is, I'm sure in a lot of ways, a better experience for the guests who were coming in. So we kind of like that. It checked off that box. It was like prime location. It's like right between Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge. If you guys are familiar with that market, it's like directly in the middle. It's literally 5 minutes from either one, 10 minutes to either one. So great location. It checked off that box. It's got views, checked off that box. And so in a lot of ways, and then because we were also considering other markets, and that was that was a tough decision. And we'll talk more about this later in other podcasts. But we were trying to decide which market to go into, and I actually remember, and I was going, we didn't talk about this in version 1 here, but there was another property I was really excited about in Bryson City.
Yes.
Right. I was like really excited about this property. We ended up not even putting an offer in on it because we felt like the Gatlinburg market was going to be a safer, less risky. That's kind of where we came to at the end of the day. Even though this property was like a very unique property, and hopefully it might come up for sale again sometime soon.
I still don't think that it's sold yet.
Yeah.
So
that's right. They
that
took
might
it
be
down.
property number 2.
It might be. Anyway, so we figured that the Gatlinburg market would just be a safe bet, essentially, is why we ended up going forward on it. And so it was very funny. Like it was supposed to be a turnkey new construction cabin, like turnkey. It was not turnkey.
No. Spoiler alert. There's still a lot of work that you have to do for a new construction cabin.
100%. And so we're actually going to talk about that in our next episode. We're going to talk about getting this thing up and going and actually getting all the systems in place, and actually like literally setting the place up, because nothing really at that point, nothing was done. But anyway, so the bigger cabin, they didn't accept the offer on that, and the new construction, the 5-bedroom, 5-bath cabin, they took it. And I remember getting the text from our realtor, or a call from our realtor, and was like, "Hey man, congratulations, you guys are short-term rental owners." And that was big
surreal.
Yeah, it was pretty surreal. It was pretty crazy. How'd you feel? Like,
I mean, honestly, I don't remember. I was so sleep deprived at that point, having a newborn. And I mean, at that point he was only 3-4 weeks old.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was surreal. Super excited that it actually worked out. Honestly, I didn't think that they were going to take it because the market was so hot, and we didn't have any escalation clauses. We didn't have any appraisal gaps or anything like that. We just offered them what they were asking, and it was kind of, I mean, I hate to say it, but it was kind of easy. They just accepted it.
Yeah, it was.
And and that was that. And then we just kind of moved on with the process. So
and in our next, and I do want to say this, like I feel like this was one of the things that it was as difficult for us as I think it is for most other people who are buying your first short-term rental. I mean, we were facing the same fears that everybody else was. And it was really funny because I think I had kind of this ongoing nagging like voice in the back of my head that was constantly thinking like all the things that you hear on a lot of the podcasts. Like if you're in the Facebook groups and the podcast, you're like listening to other investors who have taken the steps before us and who have tried to give their piece of advice on this topic. Bigger Pockets always has a question at the end of the show, which is like, what's the the question's phrased something like what's the one thing that keeps investors from taking the first step or being successful, whatever. And literally almost everybody says it's overcoming the fear, right? And so we were experiencing that very same thing. I guess I just had that nagging like voice in the back of my head that was like, just do it, just go. You can figure it out, right? Like no matter what happens, no matter what problems come up, there is a way out. You can always figure out a way out. And in the worst possible, because we actually did this, we played this exercise, which is like, what's the worst possible thing that could happen? And so we kind of went down this rabbit hole. It was like several nights of sitting in the living room and just kind of chatting back and forth, which is a scary thing to do. But at the same time, it's also very reassuring, right?
Absolutely.
Like when you sit there and you think, okay, the worst thing that could happen, what if the economy tanks? What if this thing absolutely fails? How do we get out from underneath it? Like all those things that you kind of think to yourself. And then you come to the end, you realize, well, none of that stuff's all that bad. Like we would be able to live, our family would be fine. Like we would figure it out. It'd be okay. And so then you're just kind of analyzing and you're thinking to yourself, like, I know this is risky, but I actually start to feel like it's more risky not to.
Right. You start thinking to yourself, okay, these are the worst things that could happen if we do buy it. What's the worst thing that could happen if we don't buy it?
Right.
What are the opportunities that we're missing out on if we don't buy this place? So we did buy it, and that was one of the things that pushed us over. And lo and behold, those bad things didn't happen. We did have some hiccups. There are things that we did have to figure out and overcome. But you know what? I think that we're resilient. I think that most people that are in real estate are resilient, and they're going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
And like Nathan said, there's lots of people that have walked in these steps before us, and they figured it out, and they're kind of blazing the path for us. So it's not like we're doing something that has never been done before. There are people that we can rely on for their information. Mistakes that they made, we can certainly learn from them. So you're in good hands with everybody else who's done this before. You might as well just jump, just do it.
And I will say that's been one thing that I've really enjoyed, and we're about to wrap up this episode, but that has been one thing that I've really enjoyed is I do feel like that there is a very supportive community of people, most of people who are kind of in our situation. Like we're a relatively young family. Are we still a young family?
We're young.
Okay, all right. We're a relatively young family, really kind of working to figure out how we're going to build generational wealth. Like for us, our mission is to spend as much quality time with the children as they're growing up as we possibly can. How do we get ourselves positioned in a way that we can do that? And I think that, there's so many other people who's in our situation who's going through the same thing and thinking the same things. We chose to work to make that happen through real estate investment. And specifically, and we talked about this a little bit last time, but we chose short-term rentals as the vehicle to make that happen in, just because of the high, the high dollar cash flow that you're able to potentially get out of your property. So the next episode, we're going to actually talk about the setup. Like we got the place under contract at Panera. We signed the papers. We literally packed the car and left that day, and we went up and we walked into our completed new construction short-term rental for the first time. So we're going to talk about that on the next episode. There's two things I want to kind of say here is that we're very excited for this channel in two ways. So the first way is that we're going to be bringing a lot of information to you guys, all the stuff that we're learning, all the stuff that we're very data-driven people. And I'm actually excited. Our episode number 4 is actually going to be I almost want to say it's a hack, but I'm not going to say it's a hack. That feels clickbaity. It's just something that we've realized and that we've figured out that's working for us. Our occupancy for our cabin is crazy high. And there's a whole story behind that. But we're definitely exceeding what the market is bearing right now. And we're going to share with you guys exactly how it did it. And we're going to dive in. We're going to show you owner res. We're going to show you our Rank Breeze accounts. We're going to show you literally inside of all of our stuff, all the metrics that we're using to kind of gauge this. And we're going to explain to you what our pricing strategy has been and how we're approaching pricing. And I'll be honest with you, we didn't come up with this. We actually got this from another investor who we called because we were getting very scared. It wasn't working, right? Like we weren't booking.
And we were getting same day bookings for a 5-bedroom cabin. That's just insane.
So there was another investor named Chris who was in our neighborhood. Chris, I'm gonna give you a shout out, man. At some point I need to pull you onto this podcast and thank you publicly. But we reached out to him and he kind of talked us through what he had been doing and the experience that he had been having and the success he'd been having. And once we employed this strategy, and we actually have the data to back it up, it's really interesting. Once we started employing this strategy, we instantly started getting in bookings, and our ADR is very strong. Like the ADR that we're booking at is very strong. So we're going to be doing that in episode 4. The other thing for this podcaster that I'm very excited about is I'm excited to bring on other investors. I'm excited to talk to other investors. I'm also excited to talk to other people in the industry that have information to share, things that they can bring that's going to be of value to you, that's going to help you. And I'll be honest, selfishly, that's going to help us. Like, that's a big part of the reason why we're doing this, is so that we can learn right alongside of you guys. And I definitely think, this is definitely one of those industries, kind of like I said earlier, like I've been very impressed with how supportive the industry is as a whole, as far as small family investors, when it comes to short-term rentals. That's one of the things I've been really impressed with this industry with, but it's also something that we want to do to give back as well. So, hopefully you guys will stick around with us. If you're interested in seeing episode number 4, that's going to be coming out here shortly in the next couple of weeks. Make sure that if you're interested in hearing what that strategy is, make sure that you click subscribe. We would love to have you follow us, come back and listen to more of our story, and start being a part of those interviews and hearing what other people's got to say. We definitely want to share the successes that both we're having and other people are having. So, we can't wait to see you next time. April, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Hopefully this was really helpful to you in your journey of building a business. If you liked what you heard, please click subscribe and go to iTunes and give us a rating. That helps us out tremendously when we're producing, hopefully, content of huge value to you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I hope that you have an amazing week. Go out there and crush it. I'll see you soon.